We had to get it into the truck. We're talking about a panel that's probably 500-600 pounds. You put it on a deck then to support it, and so you might be up to 700-800 pounds by the time you have all that. Getting it from here, through that door, through those doors, down hallways, because we had to go out the front stairs, was a bit heart-stopping. But ideas came up. Mark, I'm sorry I didn't introduce you. Mark, the foreman of the job, terrible. Mark, please stand up. Everybody knows Mark by now, because he's always here. He wishes to express his thanks because everybody's been so cooperative. But little ideas. Ron came up with putting a little furniture movers on the things, and you just get it done. I mean, we got it out there. A slid made a special ramp to slide it down on. Well, James couldn't be here. He was showing off a little bit, but actually removing it and getting it down onto the floor is one of the most frustrating things, because you hear sounds that you don't want to hear, but it's not cracking glass, but the glass moves because it's been set in position for so long, and you set it down and you hear this little tinkling going on. It's a bit nerve-wracking, but we got it secured, got it to the studio. It just barely fit in the front door of our studio. Anytime you have anything so large, just handling something like this becomes a whole operation in itself. We did finally get it up to one of the tables. We had a table on wheels. There is my son Alex actually working over the panel on a walkboard, because we first do a rubbing of the whole panel, and that rubbing becomes a road map. Everything on that rubbing gets marked. Every single piece of glass that is taken out of there gets labeled onto that rubbing, so we know that every single piece of glass, when we separate it, clean it, we put it back, we know exactly where it goes. There is the finished completed rubbing. There are some of the markings that we put on the rubbing so we can have identifiers, lead sizes, all those things that keep to the history of the glass. There's Alex doing, I don't know what he's doing, but he's doing something. Removing one of the overlays. There were some parts that had up to 4 overlays on them, and that would be where the flesh was concerned. You had an outside, you had the flesh part, you had 2 layers of glass. So quite an extensive set of overlays in certain parts. Taking the lead out, we take every single piece apart, and it's all cataloged on that rubbing. Every single piece, over 3,200. How many, Merle? 32? 3186. A number of pieces. All have to get cataloged. All have to be individually hand cleaned. And there's just, it's being disassembled. There's what we call the mosaics portion, which is right above the head there. The mosaic portion itself had how many pieces? 720 something. Just for those little squares. And not only did we have to catalog each one of those little squares, but we actually put our little number pieces on there so we knew which side was the top side when we put it in, because you can't always count on a square piece being square. And there's all the numbers on the rubbing, and there's all the pieces of glass with the numbers on them, getting ready for cleaning. And they're being washed. Well, nobody's there washing it. They took a lunch or something. There is the actual piece with the signature. That is the FS with the 90 on it. And that would be right over here if you want to look at it later. We went a little bit further on that, and we put a very thin piece of glass over the signature so that it protects it from people poking at it, because it was already starting to deteriorate. We didn't want to touch it or have anyone else touching it. So we did very minimal cleaning just on the perimeter, didn't touch the signature portion itself. And here's some of the pieces that got laid out. There were a lot of cracked pieces because of the sagging of the panel. What happens is there's the lead channel is like an H, and the glass fits into the H. And then there's cement that goes around the glass, and it's that cement that gives its rigidity. But it's unfortunately one of the first things that goes, and when that cement starts going, it's like putty on a window. If everybody's seen the putty on the window starts cracking, falling off. Well, then you have just the lead that's supporting it. And as any of those, like my age, you start noticing things start sagging. Well, it happens to windows too. And then the lead is the only thing holding onto it, or the glass is the only thing holding onto it at that point, and you start cracking glass. And that's where we had 300 and how many? 360 or something, whatever it was, number of pieces that were cracked. There's some real good technologies. You see those 2 bottles up front. Those 2 bottles are $50 just for those 2 bottles, but there's some wonderful epoxy. It's optically clear, won't yellow, all those things, and it edge glues the pieces back together so you don't see a big lead line showing up to where a patch was made. We've put that edge glue on. We've dropped a piece of glass on purpose. And it's broken in another place other than the epoxy. So it goes to show how strong that epoxy is. There's just all the pieces that have been glued. There's one of the feet, the toes. It was deteriorating so bad. Some of them were deteriorating so bad that we actually did have to repaint a couple of them to restore them back to their original condition again. That was the corners of the hair had deteriorated so badly that we had to repaint those pieces too. The original pieces, we put them in a box. I think we vacuum packed them too, so to keep the air away from them, to kind of archive them for the future. You know, just to keep history with history. There's some of Sean's paints that as he had to redo the feet, or the foot, or both feet. Actually, both feet, right? Yeah. And there's that mosaic with all the you got to find each little piece and put it. Merle loves jigsaw puzzles, so it's a good thing. And there it's all getting put back together. We had to actually build the angel first. We had to solder that, all those lead joints get soldered together, and then that had to be cemented first because the panel's just so big. After then that could be centered, and then we built around it at that point in order to get that accomplished. And there he just keeps on building. If you look at that I got a chance to look at that time lapse, you see the whole thing going together out in the back lobby there. One of the other biggest challenges is when you solder one side, you have to flip it over to solder the other side. And we're talking about a pretty big panel here. So we had to actually make another deck, put it on top. We have strap systems on the table, and we had to actually flip the whole thing over, and the other table became the work surface. Here's the actual cementing process where it is already forced into between the lead and the glass. He's picking it clean and then clean it up with that whiting that's on there. And there's Merle working on the middle part, the overlays. You can see the overlays going on now. We had a walk board over there. Thank goodness Merle's nice and flexible. And there's that finished panel. The rebars, we did a few little, the main panel we kept the original saddle bars. We put new saddle bars on. We actually used a different type of metal that has a hardened exterior, so they're more rigid than the original ones, so it should last longer than the original did. Even how you put on and the saddle bars use wires, and the wires are twisted. You'll see that here. And that's what holds the panel. Panels are built to be vertically strong, but originally they were there to the elements, and so you had horizontal forces hitting them with the wind and storms and that. So these saddle bars would help support that. Nowadays it's changed a little because we have HVAC systems, and you'll have either positive or negative pressure, which is almost even worse because you have a constant pull or a constant push. So I always recommend check your HVAC, make sure that it's neutralized between the outside and inside. Something for Mike Randall to do on his off time. And there's the finished panel with the crew in the background. and going back into place. We actually ventilate the space in between. There's storm glazing on the outside, and you'll see there are plugs on the top and the bottom, and by convection we get the air to circulate on the inside, because when you have colored glass, sunlight hits it, you get the solar effect, builds up heat in between, and it softens the lead, deteriorates the cement and all those things. By venting it, it takes care of that problem. And there it goes back in. And that's that. I just want to briefly say something about this school. This collection of stained glass is just amazing for what we have in this part of a country in a school. This is something you'd probably see on the East Coast in the Ivy League schools. You'd have Connick and Cram, Goodhue working out in Princeton or something like that. You wouldn't have this kind of a collection in a school like this, and it's just remarkable that it's here. I appreciate tremendously the fact that you appreciate it and are spending the money to have this done and preserved for the future, because this is just so historical for this area, and I applaud you for your tenacity to get this done.